There are still questions after a new report alleges some parliamentarians are conspiring with foreign governments. The report doesn't name names, but says some parliamentarians, both knowingly and unknowingly, helped foreign governments like China and India meddle in Canadian politics. Michelle Tessier is a former top intelligence officer at CSIS, and I spoke with her earlier. Michelle Tessier, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
We have been talking a lot about foreign interference in so much as foreign states or countries try to affect the outcome of our elections or interfere in our democracy. We haven't talked about what we're talking about this week, and that is the idea that parliamentarians might be trying to influence things for foreign actors. How surprising was that revelation to you?
Yes, obviously, because I worked with the service until last year, it wasn't surprising to me. But what was surprising was the amount of details that the report disclosed, which I think is actually a good thing, because I think Canadian citizens want to understand what is foreign interference. What are we talking about? What type of activity are we talking about? So I think it's a good thing and an interesting thing that the committee decided to release so many details.
What about the second part of that, though, and that is now the push to know who these people allegedly are, and the risks involved in that? Because you would know best, but it's my understanding intelligence is not always evidence, and we can talk about that more. But would there be a risk in naming these people, given the nature of intelligence?
Well, it's not obviously the norm for names to be released if they may be subject of investigation, or whether or not there's criminal investigations. Normally at this stage, names aren't released. It's not unusual. In this case, there could be uncorroborated intelligence. Indeed, there could be corroborated intelligence as well. And I think the important thing for me is that this indicates where there are gaps in the service's ability to share fully with all political parties.
Sure.
And under the current CSIS Act, there are a lot of limitations with whom the service can engage. And I think that has come out in previous reporting, because it would be important for the political parties to know, obviously, and to be able to put in place whatever measures they deem would counter this threat.
Would you explain a little bit to Canadians that difference between intelligence and evidence, and why that doesn't matter when we should be looking at these things?
Sure. Normally, generally speaking, an intelligence service's threshold to investigate is a bit lower than in a criminal case. So the intelligence collected isn't necessarily up to what they call evidentiary standards, where you're able to show, as an example, a chain of evidence, how you collected it, who had possession of whatever. So it is a different type of information. The challenge is currently in the criminal justice system, and I'm not a lawyer, but certainly my understanding, currently in the criminal justice system, there isn't any way to ensure that should CSIS disclose its information, its sources and methodology can be fully protected. And in simply disclosing information, you may be burning a human source, you may be revealing some methodology. Right. So that's a challenge under the current criminal system.
And should we then take the report that we saw at its face value? And by that I mean, should we believe everything that's in there because it's based on intelligence and not evidence tested in a court? What would be your assessment of how we should approach all this information?
What I would say is foreign interference is alive and well and is a growing threat. It has been a threat for years. This is not new. You may recall that a number of years ago, the then director of CSIS, Richard Fadden, actually talked about it as well, and it was not necessarily well received at the time. So this is not something new. This has been going on for years, and not only in Canada, around the world, but obviously we're very concerned about the efforts to try to create divisions and to try to lessen the credibility in our democratic institutions by foreign actors.
You talked about the value of this information. Obviously, when you were in CSIS, that's part of the job. It's all top secret, confidential. You can't share things. But I wonder, now that you've seen this report, whether that will help actually expose some things, whether you think that it could actually lead to a better outcome in terms of what we understand is happening.
I absolutely believe it would. And
Yeah.
I think the efforts of even Bill C-70, which amongst other things, is looking at expanding CSIS's ability to share information with other stakeholders. That to me is key. CSIS has put out a public report on foreign interference, but the more people know what's going on is shining the light to prevent this type of activity. If people think there's no repercussions to their activity, hostile state actors or others, then obviously that's of concern. But the more people are aware, they can protect themselves, first of all, put measures in place to ensure that this type of thing doesn't happen, or at least reduces the threat. But I think it's absolutely essential that people understand what this threat is all about and the type of activity that is taking place.
Just to go back to the parliamentarians that are involved, it does seem from the report that we're looking at a range of different things, right? Like everything from just talking to another diplomat or passing on information or trying to influence things to taking money or having a relationship with a foreign actor. And I wonder whether you would consider those things all the same, and if that is not the risk in naming people, because it's really different levels of behavior that we're talking about.
Yes, no, that's a good point. There could be very different levels of behavior. And there's also an acknowledgement that some of the activity may be unwitting, sorry.
Unwitting, yeah.
Maybe unwilling as well, but unwitting.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important. Again, I go back to the point of being able to have that two-way discussion. When we're talking about intelligence, giving the intelligence is one thing. Getting the feedback on the intelligence is equally important, so that the collectors of the intelligence know what's important, so that they can corroborate it. They can work with political parties or other stakeholders in trying to clarify certain things. That two-way discussion doesn't happen enough. But yes, there is a risk if there's one piece of reporting as opposed to a body of reporting on an individual and the type of methods that were used to collect the intelligence.
For now, the names aren't going to be made public. That's what the government says. But they are offering for party leaders to go have a look at the intelligence to see, I guess, whether any of the people in their party are affected, and then take action without naming them. They could take action. Do you think that that is the smart way to approach this for now, that leaders should be trying to get this intelligence?
I do think there should be ways, whether it's this specific intelligence or others. I think it's very important that the leaders of political parties are able to discuss with the intelligence service. I think there needs to be an acceptance that they need to know certain things in order to govern their own parties, to govern their nomination contests. In my opinion, there needs to be the ability for the intelligence service to more easily transmit information to political parties, no matter whether or not they're the party in government. And I think what we're seeing now is an example of the current restrictions that exist, and the importance that we look at those restrictions and ensure there's more of an ability to have that two-way flow of exchanges.
Michelle Tessier, really appreciate your expertise. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation.